My name is Madison, and I am 34 years old. For 6 years I funded my entire family, pouring over $200,000 into keeping them afloat. Then a fire destroyed my apartment, leaving me homeless. When I turned to them for help, my mother actually laughed in my face and said, "This is not a shelter, Madison." That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I cut them off completely. By morning, my phone lit up with 52 missed calls. If you are watching this right now, please take a moment to hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. This family journey is one you will not want to miss. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in Denver, Colorado. My parents Eleanor and Richard provided a stable life for me, and my younger siblings Tyler and Rachel. We never had extravagant things, but we never went without. I was always the responsible one, the achiever who made my parents proud. I graduated high school with honors, earned a marketing degree from the University of Colorado, and landed an entry-level position at a respected digital marketing agency. By 28, I had worked my way up to an executive position with a 6-figure salary. I had my own apartment, a decent car, and was building my savings. Life was good, predictable, secure. Everything changed during the economic downturn of 6 years ago. My father, who had run his own small construction business for over 20 years, suddenly found himself without clients. Projects were canceled, payments delayed, and eventually his business collapsed under mounting debt. I remember the phone call vividly. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and I was preparing a presentation for work when my father called, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "Madison, I hate to ask this, but we might need a little help with next month's mortgage," he said. My mother got on the line and explained their situation in more detail. Dad's business had failed, they were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. Mom had only worked part-time at a local boutique for years, claiming various health issues prevented her from working full-time. Their savings had been depleted by the business losses. "It is just until your father gets back on his feet," my mother assured me. "We would never ask if we had any other option." Meanwhile, my brother Tyler had dropped out of state college during the family crisis, coming home to help, but mostly playing video games and occasionally applying for jobs. My sister Rachel was still in high school, worried about whether she would be able to attend college at all. "We will pay you back every penny," my father promised. "This is just a temporary setback." That first month I transferred $3,500 to cover their mortgage, utilities, and groceries. I told myself it was just a one-time emergency, but 1 month turned into 2, then 3, then a year. Their mortgage was $2,300 monthly. Utilities and groceries added another $1,200. Then there were the car payments for both parents' health insurance premiums and unexpected expenses like when Dad needed minor surgery for a hernia. I also helped Tyler return to community college, paying his tuition and books. I continued contributing to Rachel's college fund to ensure she would not miss out on higher education due to our family's financial troubles. When Rachel graduated high school and got accepted to several universities, I felt proud that I had helped maintain that opportunity for her. As the months passed, I realized I was spending over $4,000 monthly to support my family. I covered family vacations I could not even attend because I was working overtime to afford everything. I paid for home repairs, new appliances, and even holiday gifts that my family exchanged with each other, as if the money had not come from me in the first place. Despite the strain, I felt proud that I could help. I had always been taught that family comes first, that we support each other through hard times. But there were warning signs I chose to ignore. My parents refused to downsize from their 4-bedroom house to something more affordable. My mother continued to get her hair done professionally every month. My father talked about his business prospects with unrealistic optimism, but took few concrete steps to find stable employment. 6 months into this arrangement, I hosted a family dinner at my apartment. I had prepared a budget plan to discuss how we could gradually reduce my financial support as they became more self-sufficient. I had spreadsheets, timelines, and even job listings for both my parents. "This is all very impressive, Madison," my father said, glancing at my carefully prepared documents. "But things are about to turn around. I have a few promising leads that could really change our situation." My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "We appreciate all your work on this, sweetie, but your father knows what he is doing. We just need a little more time." Tyler scrolled through his phone during the entire conversation, while Rachel looked uncomfortable but silent. The timeline was never discussed again. My documents were tucked away, my concerns dismissed. "This is just temporary," became the mantra they repeated whenever I expressed concern about the sustainability of our arrangement, but their actions suggested they viewed my support as permanent. They made financial decisions assuming my continued backing. They declined job opportunities that were beneath them. They maintained the lifestyle they had always had while I began to cut back on my own expenses to support theirs. "Madison has always been the responsible one," my mother would tell family friends, as if my financial support was simply an extension of my personality, rather than an extraordinary sacrifice. "We are so blessed she can help us through this difficult time." And so, I continued to help, month after month, year after year. What began as an emergency measure became our family's new normal. I was no longer just a daughter and sister. I had become the provider, the safety net, the one everyone relied on, but whose own needs were rarely considered. 3 years into supporting my family, I was passed over for a dream promotion. My boss called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, his expression sympathetic but firm. "Madison, your work is excellent, but this position requires extensive travel and weekend availability. With your current family obligations, I am concerned you would not be able to fulfill these requirements." I wanted to protest to explain that I could make it work, but the truth was unmistakable. The extra hours I spent on freelance projects to support my family, the frequent emergency phone calls I took during meetings, the exhaustion that sometimes affected my performance had all been noticed. The promotion with its substantial salary increase that would have eased my financial strain went to someone else. That same month, my mother called to ask if I could help her buy a designer purse she had been eyeing. Not a necessity, not an emergency, a luxury item that cost nearly $1,000. "Eleanor, I just missed out on a promotion that would have really helped me." I explained using her first name as I did when frustrated. "I cannot afford to buy you luxury items when I am already covering your essential expenses." "Well, I have not had anything nice for myself in years," she replied, her voice taking on the wounded tone I had come to dread. "After all we have done for you, raising you and putting you through college, I thought you might want to see your mother happy for once." This manipulation tactic had become familiar. Any boundary I attempted to establish was met with guilt about all they had done for me, as if raising their child was a loan to be repaid with interest. I eventually compromised by purchasing a less expensive bag for her birthday, cutting back on my own groceries for a month to afford it. Meanwhile, Tyler graduated from community college, but only found part-time work at a local electronics store. He claimed the economy was still too difficult for someone with his qualifications, though his friends with similar backgrounds seemed to find full-time employment. He continued living at home with me, covering his portion of household expenses. Rachel chose an expensive private university, despite my gentle suggestions that the state school offering her a partial scholarship would be more financially prudent. When I expressed concern about the cost difference, my mother accused me of trying to limit Rachel's potential. "Do you want her to have fewer opportunities than you had?" she asked tearfully. "We always gave you the very best we could." The financial strain was affecting every aspect of my life. I moved to a smaller apartment farther from work to reduce my rent. I canceled my gym membership and started running in the local park instead. I stopped meeting friends for dinner, declining social invitations with vague excuses about being busy with work. I sold my decent car and bought an older model with higher mileage and frequent mechanical issues. There came a month when I simply could not afford both my rent and my family's expenses. I called my father, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. "Dad, I hate to do this, but I need to reduce the amount I am sending this month. I am behind on my own bills." There was a long silence before he responded. "Madison, we were counting on that money for Rachel's tuition payment. She could be dropped from her classes." The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. "I will figure something out," I conceded already, calculating which freelance projects I could take on that weekend. I began working 60 to 70 hours weekly, between my full-time job and freelance projects. I developed migraines so severe, they sometimes left me nauseous and unable to look at screens, which only put me further behind. I had trouble sleeping often, lying awake, worrying about money, or working late into the night to meet deadlines. My best friend Jasmine grew increasingly concerned about the arrangement with my family. Over coffee one Sunday morning, the only social activity I still allowed myself, she finally voiced her worries directly. "Madison, this is not sustainable. You look exhausted all the time. Your family is taking advantage of your generosity, and it is destroying your health and your future." "They are my family," I defended, though my conviction had begun to waver. They would do the same for me if the situations were reversed. "Would they, though?" Jasmine asked gently. "From everything you have told me, they have shown very little concern for your well-being throughout this arrangement." I changed the subject, uncomfortable with the doubt her words stirred in me, but those doubts grew harder to ignore as the years passed. Christmas that year brought the point home painfully. I had funded expensive gifts that my family members exchanged with each other, including a new laptop for Tyler and designer boots for Rachel. My own gift from them was a dollar store mug with "World's Best Daughter" printed on it. It was not the monetary value that hurt, but the thoughtlessness, the lack of effort to show appreciation for all I had sacrificed. "You are so blessed to be able to help your family," my mother said, when she noticed my expression as I unwrapped the mug. "Not everyone has the means to be so generous." Her words framed my support as a privilege rather than a burden, my sacrifice as an obligation rather than a choice. It was becoming clear that what had begun as temporary assistance had become an entitlement in their eyes. That realization should have been my breaking point, but I continued for 3 more years. I postponed dental work, despite persistent pain from a cracked molar. I ignored the concerning noises from my aging car. I gave up any hope of buying my own home or building substantial retirement savings. Meanwhile, Tyler purchased a new gaming system while knowing I was working weekends to cover family expenses. My parents renovated their kitchen without consulting me, though I discovered I had funded it when my mother proudly showed me the new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances during a family dinner. "How did you afford this?" I asked, calculating the thousands such renovations would cost. "Oh, we had a little saved up," my mother replied vaguely, "and the contractor gave us a wonderful deal." I later discovered they had used the home repair money I had been sending monthly intended for essential maintenance to fund luxuries instead. The betrayal stung, but I had become so accustomed to putting their needs before mine that I swallowed my objections and continued writing checks. It was past midnight when I finally left the office after working late to finish a client presentation. The air had that particular spring crispness that normally would have been refreshing, but I was too exhausted to appreciate it. All I wanted was to collapse into bed and get a few hours of sleep before returning to work the next morning. I smelled the smoke before I saw the flames. As I turned onto my street, the road was blocked by fire trucks, their red lights painting the night in surreal pulses. Police officers directed traffic away from the area. Neighbors stood in small groups on the sidewalk, some crying, others simply staring in shock. My apartment building was engulfed in flames. Orange fire licked up the sides of the structure, black smoke billowing into the night sky. Firefighters aimed powerful hoses at the blaze, but even from a distance I could tell the damage was catastrophic. "That is my home," I whispered to no one, my legs suddenly unsteady beneath me. A police officer confirmed what I already knew. The fire had started in the apartment directly below mine. Everyone had evacuated safely, but the building was a total loss. We would not be allowed back in. Not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe never. I stood in the parking lot, until dawn watching my life burn away. Everything I owned was in that apartment. My grandmother's jewelry passed down when I turned 16. Photo albums from my childhood. The first painting I had purchased when I got my promotion. Professional clothing I had carefully accumulated over years. All gone in a single night. The Red Cross arrived to assist displaced residents, providing information about emergency services and temporary shelter options. My coworkers brought clothes and necessities when they heard about the fire. Neighbors offered meals and sympathy. The community support was touching, but it could not solve my underlying problem. The fire had revealed the precarious nature of my financial situation. Years of supporting my family had left me without the savings necessary to weather this crisis. My insurance agent explained that while my policy would eventually cover some losses, there would be delays in processing the claim. More importantly, the temporary housing allowance would cover only 2 weeks in a budget motel, not the months it might take to find a new apartment and replace everything I had lost. Most people have emergency savings for situations like this, the agent said, not unkindly. Do you have family you can stay with temporarily? I nodded automatically, though doubt gnawed at me. In the immediate aftermath of the fire, I had not considered reaching out to my family. Some instinct had held me back, some understanding that I could not articulate even to myself. For 2 weeks, I lived in a roadside motel, its thin walls doing little to block the sounds of traffic and other guests. I charged the room to my emergency credit card, watching, with growing anxiety as the balance approached the limit. Each night, I sat on the sagging mattress, calculating and recalculating my finances, trying to find a solution that did not exist. The fire had not only taken my possessions but had triggered something deeper. I began having nightmares about flames, waking in panic, certain I was trapped in a burning building. Even awake, the smell of smoke seemed to follow me. A car backfiring would send my heart racing. I was traumatized, not just by what had happened, but by the utter vulnerability of my position. When the insurance agent called to explain further delays in my settlement, I finally faced the truth. I was about to be homeless. The motel would need payment for another week, money I simply did not have. My next paycheck was still days away, and was already allocated to my family's monthly expenses. I called my father, first explaining the situation as calmly as I could. The insurance money is delayed, and I have nowhere to go when the motel kicks me out tomorrow. Could I stay in the spare room for a few weeks until I get back on my feet? His hesitation was palpable. Let me talk to your mother and call you back. He never called back. Instead, my mother phoned an hour later. Madison, we just do not think it would work having you stay here. The guest room is being renovated and your father is under so much stress already. Mom, I am about to be homeless, I said, my voice breaking. I have nowhere else to go. Well, what about your friend Jasmine? Or perhaps a coworker? It would really be inconvenient for us right now. I called Tyler next, hoping my brother might offer his couch, or even lobby my parents on my behalf. That is a tough situation, sis, he said, sounding distracted. But I am still living at home, and you know how Mom gets when she has made up her mind about something. I cannot really get involved. My sister Rachel was equally unhelpful. My roommate would never allow it, she explained, though I had not even suggested staying in her college dorm. Maybe you could find a shelter or something. A shelter. My own sister, whose education I had ensured through years of financial sacrifice, was suggesting I go to a homeless shelter, rather than inconvenience her in any way. As the reality of my situation sank in, I made one last desperate attempt. I decided to drive to my parents' house, certain they could not reject me face to face. They were my family. Despite everything, I still believed that in a true crisis, they would not turn their backs on me. I was wrong. I arrived at my parents' suburban home, just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn I had paid a service to maintain. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering courage, 2 suitcases of salvaged possessions in my trunk, representing all that remained of my independent life. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her expression shifting from surprise to unmistakable annoyance when she saw the suitcases in my hands. "Madison, what are you doing here?" I stepped into the house, noticing immediately that the living room had been redecorated with an expensive-looking sectional sofa and glass coffee table I had never seen before. Another renovation I had unknowingly financed. "Mom, I told you on the phone. I have nowhere to go," I explained, setting down my suitcases. "The motel wants payment for another week, and I just do not have it. I just need a place to stay until the insurance money comes through, or until I can find an affordable apartment." My mother looked at my suitcases as if they contained something contagious. "Madison, we discussed this. The timing is just not good. The guest room is full of boxes from the kitchen renovation." "I could sleep on the couch," I suggested, gesturing to the new sectional, "or even the basement. I just need somewhere to go." That is when it happened. My mother laughed. Not a nervous laugh or a sympathetic one, a dismissive laugh, as if my homelessness was somehow amusing or inconvenient to her. "This is not a shelter, Madison," she said, the words striking like physical blows. "You are a grown woman with a good job. Surely you can figure something out." I noticed the designer watch on her wrist, one I recognized from a luxury catalog, easily worth several $1,000s. Another purchase my support had made possible, while I wore second-hand clothes and postponed medical care. My brother Tyler came downstairs during this conversation, nodded awkwardly in my direction but avoided eye contact. "I am just grabbing a snack," he mumbled clearly, unwilling to involve himself in the situation. My sister Rachel remained seated on the sectional throughout the exchange, texting on her phone occasionally, glancing up with obvious impatience as if my crisis was interrupting her social media browsing. My father finally emerged from his home office, looking uncomfortable, but not particularly sympathetic. "Maybe we could help you find a cheap apartment," he offered weakly, standing behind my mother as if using her as a shield. "Or loan you a little money for another week at the motel." Loan me money. After 6 years and over $200,000 of my money supporting them, they were offering to loan me money as if I was a distant acquaintance asking for a handout. "You are a grown woman," my mother repeated more firmly this time. "Figure it out. We all have problems, Madison." In that moment something broke inside me. Some fundamental belief about family, about love, about reciprocity, shattered beyond repair. I had supported these people through years of financial hardship. I had sacrificed my own financial security, health, and future for them. And now, in my darkest hour, they could not offer even temporary shelter. I picked up my suitcases without another word, and walked back to my car. No one followed me. No one called after me. The door closed firmly behind me before I had even reached the sidewalk. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, tears blurring my vision so badly, I eventually had to pull over. I found myself in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, its neon sign, one of the few lights still glowing in the late evening. Inside, a waitress named Dorothy took one look at my tear-streaked face and brought me a cup of coffee without my asking. "On the house, honey," she said kindly. "You look like you have had a rough night." That simple act of kindness from a stranger, when my own family had shown none, broke something loose inside me. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and sobbed until I had no tears left. When I emerged, Dorothy had left a sandwich next to my coffee with a note saying, "No charge. Things will get better." I called my coworker Jessica from the diner, swallowing my pride to explain my situation. Without hesitation, she offered her couch for a few nights. "As long as you need," she insisted, giving me her address and telling me to come right over. That night, lying on Jessica's couch, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I experienced a clarity I had never known before. My family had been using me for years. The fire had simply revealed what had always been true. They saw me not as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be exploited. Their love, if it could be called that, was entirely conditional on what I could provide for them. I was homeless, but somehow, I also felt free. The truth, however painful, was finally undeniable. And truth, even devastating truth, can be the foundation for something new. The week following my parents' rejection was a blur of practical concerns and emotional turmoil. I slept on Jessica's couch trying to be the perfect house guest despite my circumstances. I left for work before she woke, made sure to keep my few possessions neatly stacked in a corner, and offered to pay for groceries and utilities, despite my financial strain. "Madison, stop," Jessica said firmly one evening, as I insisted on washing dishes after cooking dinner for us both. "You do not have to earn your right to basic shelter. That is what friends do for each other. Real friends, anyway." Her words highlighted the contrast between her generosity and my family's callousness. Jessica, who had received nothing from me but friendship, offered unconditional support. My family, despite years of financial assistance, offered nothing in my time of need. 3 days after moving onto Jessica's couch, I met with a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. I brought 6 years of bank statements, credit card bills, and money transfer receipts. As she reviewed the documents, her professional demeanor slipped, revealing shock at the extent of my support for my family. "Madison, according to these records, you have provided your family with $237,845 over the past 6 years, she said, sliding a spreadsheet toward me. "That is not including the interest you have paid on credit cards or the opportunity cost of not investing this money." Seeing the total written in black and white was staggering. With that money, I could have made a substantial down payment on a home. I could have fully funded a retirement account. I could have started my own business, or taken a year to travel. Instead, it had disappeared into my family's lifestyle, with nothing to show for it but their entitlement and my precarious financial position. "If you continue on this path," the advisor warned, "you will reach retirement age with minimal savings and maximum vulnerability. This is not just unwise, it is unsustainable." At her recommendation, I made an appointment with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Kimberly Lewis listened attentively as I recounted the past 6 years, the fire and my family's rejection. "What you are describing," she said gently, "has elements of financial abuse and exploitation. Your family has created a one-sided relationship where your needs are consistently subordinated to theirs. The fact that they refuse to help you during a genuine crisis reveals the transactional nature of their love." I bristled at the term abuse, instinctively defending my family. "They did not force me to help them," I offered. "Initially, perhaps," Dr. Lewis acknowledged. "But they created conditions that made it nearly impossible for you to establish boundaries. They used guilt, obligation, and manipulation to ensure your continued support regardless of the cost to you." Over the next several sessions, we explored the cultural and familial expectations that had led me to accept this arrangement for so long. My identity, as the responsible one, the deeply ingrained belief that family obligations trumped all other considerations, the subtle ways my parents had programmed me from childhood to prioritize family needs above my own. Meanwhile, my friends rallied around me in ways my family never had. Jasmine helped me search for affordable apartments. Jessica extended her couch offer indefinitely. Co-workers organized a gift card collection to help me replace necessities lost in the fire. These acts of genuine care contrasted sharply with my family's behavior, further clarifying what healthy relationships should look like. I spent hours researching financial codependency and enabling behaviors. I read articles about adult children supporting parents and the complicated dynamics that often resulted. I discovered I was far from alone in my experience, though the extent of my financial support was unusual. In my journal, I began documenting my thought process, weighing obligations against self-preservation, family ties against personal boundaries. I created pros and cons lists for continuing financial support versus cutting it off completely. Pros of continuing support: avoiding guilt, maintaining family relationships, protecting sisters' education. Cons: perpetuating unhealthy dynamics, enabling dependency, sacrificing my future, destroying my financial security. The decision crystallized one afternoon as I walked through a neighborhood park watching children play while their parents chatted nearby. A simple thought surfaced with unexpected clarity: I deserve better. Not just better treatment from my family, but a better life than the one I had accepted. I deserved financial security, genuine relationships, and the opportunity to build my own future. That evening, I sat at Jessica's kitchen table and drafted an email to my entire family. I chose email rather than a phone call or in-person meeting, because I needed to express myself fully without interruption or manipulation. The email was direct, but not cruel. I listed the total amount I had provided over 6 years. I detailed specific instances of their taking advantage of my generosity, including the kitchen renovation, luxury purchases, and their refusal to downsize or seek adequate employment. I described my experience after the fire and the profound pain of their rejection when I needed them most. Effective immediately, I am ending all financial support, I wrote. I will not pay the mortgage, utilities, car payments, tuition, or any other expenses. I need to rebuild my own life after the fire and establish financial security for myself. I established clear boundaries for future contact, explaining that while I was not cutting off communication entirely, I would need time and space to heal. I specified that any discussions of money would result in my immediately ending the conversation. This decision is not negotiable, I concluded. I hope that eventually we can build a healthier relationship based on mutual respect, rather than financial dependency. But that process begins with this necessary boundary. I read the email multiple times, refining the language to ensure it was firm, but not vindictive. When I finally hit send, I felt an immediate sense of lightness, as if a physical burden had been lifted from my shoulders. The response was swift and predictable. My phone rang less than 5 minutes after sending the email, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "How dare you?" she began without preamble, her voice shaking with rage. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us, with threats and abandonment." "They are not threats, Mom," I replied calmly. "They are boundaries, and I am not abandoning you. I am simply no longer funding your lifestyle." "We will lose the house," she cried, her tone shifting from anger to tearful manipulation. "Is that what you want, for your family to be homeless?" The irony of her concern about homelessness when she had turned me away days earlier was not lost on me. "You have options," I pointed out. "You can sell the house and buy something affordable. Dad can take one of the many job offers he has declined over the years. Tyler can work full-time instead of part-time." The conversation continued in this vein for 20 minutes, cycling through anger, tears, guilt, and threats. When my mother realized I would not be swayed, she handed the phone to my father. "Madison, you are not thinking clearly," he said, in the reasonable tone he had always used to dismiss my concerns. "This fire has traumatized you, and you are making rash decisions. Let us talk about this in person, when you have calmed down." "I am calmer and thinking more clearly than I have in years," I responded. "My decision stands." After my father came Tyler, his message simple and accusatory. "You are destroying this family. I hope you can live with yourself." Rachel sent a lengthy text, rather than calling, explaining in dramatic terms how my decision would force her to leave her prestigious university and transfer to a state school, destroying her future prospects and social connections. The barrage of guilt and manipulation continued, until I finally turned off my phone for the night, emotionally exhausted, but oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, I slept deeply, and without interruption, my dreams free of the anxiety that had plagued me for so long. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, I was met with an onslaught of notifications. 52 missed calls, 37 text messages, 18 voicemails. The breakdown was telling: 23 calls from my mother, 14 from my father, 9 from my brother, and 6 from my sister. The voicemails ranged from rage to sobbing pleas. My mother alternated between threatening to tell the extended family I had abandoned them and begging me to reconsider for the sake of our family unity. My father spoke of foreclosure notices and impending financial disaster. Tyler suddenly needed emergency tuition money for a summer course he had never mentioned before. Rachel sent dramatic texts about having to leave her university and how her life was basically over. Most manipulative were the calls from extended family members, aunts and uncles and cousins, who had been contacted by my parents with a carefully edited version of events. "How could you do this to your parents after all they have sacrificed for you?" my Aunt Barbara demanded in one voicemail, clearly unaware of the financial reality of the past 6 years. I did not respond to any of these initial contacts following Dr. Lewis's advice, to give myself space to strengthen my resolve before engaging. Instead, I focused on practical matters. I found a small studio apartment within my budget, signed a 6-month lease, and scheduled movers for the few possessions I had salvaged from the fire. I met with human resources at work to update my financial information and remove my family members as beneficiaries on my company insurance and retirement accounts. These practical steps reinforced my decision, making it more concrete, with each form signed and arrangement changed. The life I was building might be smaller than the one I had envisioned years ago, but it was mine alone, free from the crushing weight of supporting multiple adults who were capable of supporting themselves. A week after my email, when the initial storm of calls had subsided somewhat, my parents escalated their tactics. They showed up at my workplace unannounced, creating a scene in the reception area that required security to intervene. "My daughter is refusing to help her family," my mother proclaimed loudly, as security officers escorted her from the building. "She wants us to lose our home." The public embarrassment was excruciating, but it also revealed to my colleagues the true nature of the situation I had kept private for so long. Many expressed support and shared their own stories of family financial entanglements, further validating my decision to establish boundaries. The next escalation came in the form of a certified letter demanding repayment for loans provided during my college years. The letter, clearly drafted without legal counsel, claimed my parents had kept meticulous records of every expense related to my upbringing and education totaling over $100,000, with appropriate interest applied. I consulted an attorney who reviewed the letter and assured me it had no legal merit. "Parental support of a minor child is a legal obligation, not a loan," she explained. "And any contributions to your college expenses would be considered gifts, unless there was a formal loan agreement signed by both parties." More concerning was her assessment that my family's behavior was verging on harassment. At her recommendation, I had her draft a cease and desist letter, formally requesting that they stop contacting my workplace and limit their communications to email only. The letter had an unexpected effect. Rather than escalating further, my family suddenly redirected their energy towards solving their financial problems. According to mutual friends, my mother had taken a full-time position at a department store, something she had claimed her health would not allow for years. My brother miraculously found full-time employment at an insurance company within 2 weeks of my financial cutoff. My sister transferred to the state university for the upcoming semester, arranging financial aid and a part-time campus job to cover expenses. Their rapid adaptation confirmed what I had suspected all along. They were not incapable of financial independence. They had simply found it more convenient to rely on me than to support themselves. This realization triggered complicated emotions: relief that they would not truly become homeless or destitute, anger that they had depended on me unnecessarily for so long, hurt that our relationship had been so fundamentally imbalanced, pride that I had finally established a boundary that should have been in place years earlier. Through ongoing therapy sessions, I learned to process these feelings without falling back into old patterns. Dr. Lewis helped me recognize that my guilt was a programmed response designed to pull me back into the role of family provider. She encouraged me to acknowledge the feeling without acting on it, to understand its source without allowing it to dictate my choices. The first month of true financial independence was revelatory. Without the $4,000 monthly drain of family support, I could afford not only my modest new apartment, but also to begin rebuilding my emergency fund. I opened a separate savings account symbolically, breaking financial ties with my past, and deposited the first $1,000 with a sense of achievement I had not experienced in years. Small indulgences I had denied myself for years became possible again. A new work wardrobe to replace clothes lost in the fire. Dental work to finally repair my cracked molar. Dinner with friends without calculating how each expense would affect my ability to pay my parents' mortgage. The calls and messages gradually decreased in frequency and intensity. By the 6-week mark, I received only occasional texts from my sister, who seemed to be adapting to her new circumstances with surprising resilience. By 2 months, even my mother's messages had shifted from demands and accusations to awkward attempts at normal conversation, carefully avoiding any mention of money. The freedom I experienced was not just financial, but emotional. Without the constant drain of worry and responsibility for multiple adults, I had mental energy for my own growth and healing. I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been subsumed by the role of family provider. I joined a book club, started taking weekend photography classes, and volunteered at an animal shelter, slowly rebuilding a life centered around my own needs and interests, rather than others' demands. 6 months after cutting off financial support to my family, I stood in the center of my new studio apartment, surveying the space I had carefully created for myself. The furniture was second-hand, but chosen with purpose. The walls displayed framed photographs from my weekend photography class. The small balcony held potted herbs and a comfortable chair where I drank morning coffee. It was modest compared to what I might have had without 6 years of supporting my family, but it was completely mine. Each item represented a choice I had made for myself, rather than a sacrifice for others. The rent payment, while substantial for the limited space, came entirely from my own earnings, with no obligation to stretch it to cover multiple households. My financial recovery progressed steadily. I had built a 3-month emergency fund, ensuring I would never again be one disaster away from homelessness. I had increased my retirement contributions, beginning the long process of making up for years of minimal savings. My credit card debt, accumulated during the years of family support, was on a structured repayment plan that would see it eliminated within 18 months. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Lewis continued to help me process the complex emotions surrounding my family situation. We worked through the guilt that still occasionally surfaced, the anger that flared when I thought of their rejection after the fire, and the grief for the loving family relationship I had believed in, but never truly had. Boundaries are not just about saying no to others. Dr. Lewis reminded me, in one particularly insightful session, they are about saying yes to yourself, to your own well-being and future. This perspective helped me establish healthier boundaries in all relationships, not just with my family. I became more assertive at work, declining projects that required unreasonable overtime. I was more honest with friends about my needs and limitations. I began dating again, carefully assessing potential partners for signs of the financial exploitation I had become expert at recognizing. The genuine friendships I developed during this period proved more nurturing than any family relationship I had experienced. Jessica and I remained close, our bond strengthened by the weeks I had spent on her couch. Jasmine checked in, regularly celebrating each milestone in my recovery. New friends from my photography class and volunteer work knew me not as the responsible daughter who supported everyone, but simply as Madison, a woman rebuilding her life with determination and growing confidence. My career flourished without the constant drain of family emergencies. I earned the promotion that had previously eluded me, my boss, specifically citing my improved focus and availability. The salary increase accelerated my financial recovery, allowing me to build savings while still enjoying occasional small luxuries. Contact with my family became less frequent, but also less fraught with manipulation and demands. 3 months after my email, my mother sent a message that, while falling short of a true apology, acknowledged some mistakes in how we handled things. 2 months later, my father sent a handwritten letter expressing regret for not being the father you deserved during difficult times. My brother Tyler surprisingly showed the most growth. 6 months after the cutoff, he called to tell me he had been promoted to assistant manager at his company and had moved into his own apartment. "I get it now," he said awkwardly. "What it means to stand on your own feet. I should have done this years ago, instead of letting you carry all of us." It was the closest thing to validation I had received from any family member, an acknowledgement that the situation had been fundamentally unfair to me. My sister Rachel visited during her spring break, 9 months after I had stopped supporting the family. Over coffee in my small apartment, we had our first honest conversation in years. "I thought you were being cruel when you cut us off," she admitted, "but transferring to State University was actually the best thing for me. I have real friends now, not just people who like me for my family's supposed money. And my part-time job has taught me more about responsibility than anything else in my life." These small steps toward reconciliation did not erase the past or immediately heal the damaged relationships. I maintained firm boundaries, agreeing to limited contact with family members who demonstrated genuine change but refusing to engage with any discussion of financial support. As my life stabilized, I reflected often on the lessons of the past year. I had learned that true family is defined by mutual support and respect, not merely by blood relation. I had discovered that love which disappears in times of need is not love at all, but convenience or exploitation. Most importantly, I had recognized my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. "Do not set yourself on fire to keep others warm," became my personal mantra, a reminder that self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction serves no one in the end. Real love, I came to understand, nurtures the giver as well as the receiver. It does not drain one person to fill another. The journey from family provider to self-advocate had been painful but necessary. In establishing boundaries that others initially perceived as selfish, I had actually created the possibility for healthier relationships based on genuine care rather than financial dependency. By refusing to enable my family's exploitation, I had forced them toward independence that ultimately benefited everyone. 1 year after the fire that had triggered this transformation, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, feeling a contentment that had once seemed impossible. The apartment was small, my savings still modest compared to what they might have been, but I was secure in ways that transcended financial considerations. I had learned to value myself, to prioritize my well-being without guilt, to recognize the difference between generous giving and destructive enabling. If you have ever found yourself carrying a financial burden for family members who take your support for granted, I hope my story gives you courage to examine that arrangement honestly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop enabling dependency and establish healthy boundaries. Your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice for others, especially when that sacrifice is neither appreciated nor reciprocated. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? What gave you the strength to make that change? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Remember, choosing yourself is not selfish when others have been choosing themselves at your expense all along.